let's get to the checklist. What is your quick action checklist so that you know exactly who you owe a 1099 NEC to? Okay. So if you paid any contractor over $600 in 2025, now's the time to do your bookkeeping, gather up that info, and determine who you owe one to, and get that form filled out and sent to them and the IRS by January 31st. Okay. That's your big picture. Here's your checklist. Welcome to the Sunlight Tax Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for self-employed people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, design nerd, tax pro, author of Taxes for Humans, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're a creative, wellness, or mission-driven entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, beautiful. Welcome. January is such a big month for taxes and for setting up for your whole year to be good. So what I want to do for you today is talk to you about 1099s. Today's episode is going to be super practical, tactical. I want to get into what the new tax law changed about 1099 reporting and issuing so that you just have a sense as a self-employed person what you're going to be receiving. And then I want to give you a checklist to issue 1099s, which is your obligation when you are self-employed to issue 1099s to anybody that you paid over $600 in the course of your business. Okay? So I'm going to give you a short and sweet checklist so you know exactly who you owe a 1099 to. And also, if you want more information, I have all this in a video format with a beautiful outline and lots of links to the places that you will want to go for extra help in a short and sweet course that I have on 1099s if you're interested in digging in a little further. But for now, let's do the basic update, the checklist, and then I'll show you how to get that course if you want it. All right, here we go. So what are 1099s at all? What's the point of them, right? 1099s are a reporting statement that you use to report income on your taxes that basically show income that comes generally from sources other than employment, right? The big tax form that most people get, because most people are employees, they get a W-2. If that is your only source of income, congratulations. You're not a listener of the Sunlight Tax Podcast because your taxes are easy and the rest of us have harder things to do. And that's why you listen to what I have to say. So 1099s are generally something you do have to deal with when you are self-employed. Okay. There are actually a whole bunch of kinds of 1099s. The one that you get, the 1099 NEC, and also probably the 1099K, these are the kinds that we see the most frequently as self-employed people. I'll get into what those are in a second. So those are probably the ones that you're familiar with. There's an older one called the 1099 MISC for miscellaneous, which still exists and it has a purpose. That used to be how non-employment compensation was reported. Now they've changed that to its own form called the 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation. But there's tons of kinds of 1099s. There's 1099s for interest, for gambling proceeds, just on and on and on. So I'm going to use an abbreviation and just say 1099, but I want you to know that in general, there are different kinds where you need to know the difference between one or the other. I'll try to clarify. Okay. So the purpose of a 1099 is to report income that potentially might go undocumented otherwise, and of course be under threat of not getting reported at all and that proper tax not being collected. Okay. In general, there's been a trend for lowering the thresholds for reporting income, which is important. You know, just as a civic matter across the United States, there's this thing called the tax gap, and that is the difference between the tax that is actually owed by taxpayers versus the tax that is actually paid. We want, as a society, to be reducing the tax gap. We want to collect all the taxes that we are owed. I know when it comes to you as the individual, you might feel like, oh, I'd love to get away with not paying all my taxes. But if you think about all your fellow taxpayers, It really sucks that people don't pay their tax bill and don't report their income properly. Tax laws need to be fair in the first place. That's why we advocate and run elections. If we don't like tax laws, that's the job of politics, to fix them and make them more fair and what we want. But actually enforcing the law as it exists, that's the name of the game, truly. Okay, so 1099s help income not go unreported, right? They help name income and force people to report it. The trend has been to lower the thresholds for reporting so that smaller and smaller amounts of income get seen in the tax system and don't slip into that tax gap where people don't report it and pay taxes rightfully that they owe. Also, the other trend at the same time has been increasing penalties, okay? So what is interesting is that I'm going to just try and stick to the facts because, there are sort of partisan positions on these things, but I would say these have been generally bipartisan feelings. However, in the new One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed in 2025 under a Republican Congress and president, a lot of the thresholds for filing got increased again, right? Largely due to lobbying from companies like Stripe and Square that didn't want to have to issue 1099-Ks to every little mom and pop shop who made only a couple transactions, right? I can understand the feeling there. Anyway, so there have been some changes in that direction. So there are some of that stricter lower reporting thresholds, those have gone away with the new tax law. However, something I noticed that I've noticed didn't get any press is that the penalties are continuing to go up for non-reporting. Okay. So even though not as many 1099s may get issued, not filing a 1099 that you do owe, the penalties are continuing that trend that's been in place for several years of getting worse every year. Just to let you know what the penalties are this year, if you owe someone a 1099 and you fail to issue it, first of all, don't think you're getting away with it. There are 2 checkboxes on your Schedule C that say, did you pay anyone over $600? Check, yes or no. And if so, did you issue them the 1099 that you were required to? So you are attesting on a legal document to the federal government with your signature on it that you have properly followed the rules on 1099s. So believe me, there is a mechanism to make sure you receive your punishment if you don't do the right thing. I'm just the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. Okay, so just to give you a sense of what those penalties are, in 2025, when you were doing your taxes for 2024, the penalties were $60 per 1099 that you didn't issue if you were up to 30 days late. That's kind of like an oopsie amount of time. And by the way, the deadline is January 31st. So basically, if you got your act together and did get them in a little late, but just in February, right, that penalty went up to $130 per 1099 if you were 31 days late through August 1st. And if you waited until August 1st, or didn't file at all, that penalty went up to $330 per 1099 you didn't issue. And if you had intentional disregard, the penalty is $660 per unfiled return. Now, it's 2026. Those penalties have all gone up. $60 if you're 30 days late, $130 if you're over 30 days late per return, per 1099, $340 if you file after August 1st. And if you intentionally disregard the law, then $680 per 1099. So I want to remind you, you may owe 20 1099s, right? Maybe you had a web designer, some branding help, a product photographer, a fabricator, right? You might have paid a lot of different people and owe a lot of people 1099s. These penalties are per 1099 that you are late on. So that's a little too long on penalties, but please understand that this rule does apply to you and the penalties are very stiff. There is no accountant in the world who is going to sign your tax return if you paid people and didn't issue them a 1099. There is no getting around it. Hey, real quick, I just want to pop in and tell you that my book, Taxes for Humans, is available in bookstores now. Taxes for Humans is the funny, empowering, practical tax guide that will help you do your own taxes and make them easier every year. Taxes for Humans is the most useful tax guide you've ever seen. This book gives you all my secrets and will be a reference you use year after year, with a whole section on fixing a bad tax situation, spouses gone rogue, amending your tax return, what to do if you can't pay your tax bill, plus tools for leveling up, like setting up simple systems to stay organized and saving like a millionaire with tax-smart accounts. Get the book at your favorite independent bookstore or come to my website, sunlighttax.com/book. You can even request Taxes for Humans at your local library or college library. So if you want to get the book for yourself, go to sunlighttax.com/book to buy Taxes for Humans. I can't wait to help make your taxes easier. All right. In general, as a self-employed person, the kinds of 1099s you are going to be dealing with are the 1099 NEC for non-employee compensation and the 1099K, which is a reporting statement you'll receive from a third-party payment platform or an online seller. So if you make sales through Etsy, Eventbrite, Stripe, Square, PayPal Business, etc., you'll get a 1099K for that transaction. Now, let's talk about the 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation rules, okay? So businesses must report payments for services of $600 or more to non-employees on the 1099 NEC. Here are the basic rules. Anyone you paid, any contractor you paid over $600 in the 2025 calendar year to do work for you in your business, you owe a 1099. That's the basic rule. That's the biggie. If you take nothing else away from this episode, that's the one I want you to understand. Now, please understand also this is for business. It's not for personal payments. So if you spent over $600 paying a hairdresser this year, that's personal. You don't owe your hairdresser a 1099. Okay. Same with a dentist, right? So personal things are personal. You don't have to 1099 anybody for that. But if you paid somebody to do product photography, to do branding work for your business, maybe a copywriter, those are people that you will have to issue a 1099 to. I do want to warn you that according to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the filing threshold for 1099s is going to go up next year in 2026 for payments that you make through 2026. So you'll be filing that tax return in 2027. That threshold will be $2,000, right? So it's getting higher and you will probably therefore have to issue fewer 1099s next year. But this year, the old rule is still in place. So the threshold for your 2025 payments now, here in 2026, as you do your 2025 tax return, is still $600, okay? One copy of your 1099 that you issue to a contractor goes to them for their reporting, and another copy goes directly to the IRS, okay? So it's really important to know that those two copies go out. The IRS is going to see this money, even if you maybe got the address wrong in the contractor and they missed their 1099. It's a little backstop in the system. And penalties and interest accrue starting after January 31st. So February 1st is when penalties begin, right? And I told you what those are. Those start from even being 1 day late at $60 per unfiled 1099. So this is really serious. It's a thing you want to make sure that you are on top of as a small business owner and self-employed person. All right, I'm going to skip a couple of the noodly details about attorney payments, which have special rules, rent payments, which have special rules, and ACH transfers, which also have some special rules. And let's talk about the 1099K. By the way, all those special rules I do get into on my short under 1 hour course on 1099. So if you want to check the show notes to go to that, or you can go to sunlighttax.com/1099 and get the full course. You can get all those rules about attorney payments, rent payments, ACH transfers. Okay, so next, 1099K reporting threshold changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This is a change in threshold that affects this year's taxes, okay? Now, the good news is you don't have to worry about issuing 1099Ks because you, if you're listening to this podcast, you are not Stripe, you are not PayPal, you are not a third-party payment processor, right? But you probably will receive 1099-Ks. So I'm going to talk about, there's two sides of the 1099 thing. You probably will both receive some and issue some. The 1099-K you will only receive. You're not going to issue 1099-Ks. But here are the rules. For 2025, you will only receive a 1099-K from a third-party payment processor for amounts you earned over $20,000 and over 200 transactions, right? Now, if you use Stripe to process payments in your business like I do, easily you could make over 200 transactions and over $20,000. I certainly do. I certainly do get 1099-Ks. In fact, I get them from multiple sources because I take PayPal and Stripe. So I typically get a 1099-K from both of them. There had been a change of threshold to a lower threshold amount for getting a 1099-K that was scheduled to come into effect in 2025. And I just want to be here to clarify you what the updated tax law says. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act officially changed that threshold away from the lower threshold to $20,000 and 200 transactions. Okay, so that is the rule for this year. All right, note that 1099-K transactions are only meant to report on business transactions and not on personal transactions. If you're a listener of this podcast, you've probably heard me talk about the incredibly important thing of separating your business from your personal accounts. This is one of the headaches that it will cause if you don't do that. If you use Venmo to receive payment for your business, and you use that same Venmo account to reimburse friends when you all share takeout, you are going to have a mess on your hands where you get a 1099 that reports on all of the money and only some of that money is actually tax reportable, okay? So I want you to know that only the business income is actually reportable there. Those, pizza reimbursements from your friends, that's not a business transaction. But if you're mixing those transactions into one account, it's all going to come into you on one statement, and that will cause you a bit of a headache. So if you don't yet have religion on separating accounts, let this be your moment to be like, oh, I don't want it to suck like this. Let me separate these accounts. All right. I will also warn you that while the federal threshold for receiving a 1099-K is nice and high, $20,000 and 200 transactions, the states are different, okay? Some states honor the federal threshold, but a lot of states did what the earlier Biden administration had in progress at the time, which was lowering the reporting thresholds. So a lot of states will require you to get a 1099-K, even if you made only $600 on Stripe, Square, Venmo, PayPal, okay? So be aware that that federal threshold and your state threshold could be very different. In the outline in my course, I give you links to show you what a list of those states is. You can look one up. Stripe has a really good list of all the states' 1099-K reporting thresholds is. It's a good idea to check in on your state. All right. Let's get to the checklist. What is your quick action checklist so that you know exactly who you owe a 1099 NEC to? Okay. So if you paid any contractor over $600 in 2025, now's the time to do your bookkeeping, gather up that info, and determine who you owe one to, and get that form filled out and sent to them and the IRS by January 31st. Okay. That's your big picture. Here's your checklist. Before you ever pay someone, okay? So this is your mantra for going forward so that your taxes starting now will be smooth and easy. We can't fix the past, but we can make the future better, right? So your new rule, when you pay someone this year, what I want you to do is make sure anyone you hire as a contractor or pay as a contractor, you get a W-9 from them. Okay. You've probably realized that if you do work for a company, for a nonprofit as a contractor, you do not get paid until you've submitted a W-9 to their accounting department. Have you ever had that experience? I certainly have. Well, why do they do that? They do that because they are required to issue you a 1099 at the end of the year and they don't want you to go move to Spain and not leave a forwarding address, not be able to contact you. And then they are in this awful position of breaking the law, not filing your 1099 because they can't find you to get that information. So this is why when you work with a larger organization with better setup and better systems, you'll find you're never going to get $1 out of them until you give them that W-9 paperwork. Take a page out of that playbook. That can be your playbook too. So I recommend you never pay someone until you get a W-9 from them. This is your one moment of leverage to make sure that they give you that paperwork. And it can be hard to chase people down to get a W-9 from them later in the year. But you know what? You're about to have that experience this month if you didn't get W-9s. This is going to be the month you have to chase people for W-9s, see how much fun it is, and then make it your new rule going forward. Again, let that pain of the past be your teacher for the future. Okay, so you want to get a W-9 from anybody that you're going to pay in your business. Also, there's secure information on that. It's got their social security number. It's a way that somebody could steal their personal identity. So make sure you're never asking somebody to email you a completed W-9. You can send them a blank one and say, fill this out and get it back to me through snail mail or Dropbox. That's fine. Okay. But just make sure you take care with their social security numbers. You don't want to put somebody at risk. Okay. The W-9 is your savior. It's a form that you keep, and it gives you the information you need to know if you need to issue somebody a 1099. Okay. So it's actually something that is helpful for you. You want to just store that in a nice, easy place that you will be able to find it. Okay. Next on your checklist, number 2. Do your bookkeeping for 2025. So if you paid any contractors, you're going to have your books all done for all of 2025 this month, okay? Because that's the only way you're going to know what the total amounts are that you paid to any contractors. So if you haven't done your bookkeeping yet, now's the time. Sit down, get your 2025 books finished so that you have totals for amounts that you paid people. All right, if you have software, I want you to run a report. And if you use a spreadsheet system, that is absolutely fine. Make a list of anybody that you paid over $600 cumulatively to in the year 2025, okay? So you're going to see which of these people you paid over $600. And then you go back to the rules about issuing 1099s and you see who might not qualify. That's your master list of everyone you might have to issue a 1099 to. And what you're going to do is go backwards from there and cross people off and eliminate the people who you paid in a way where you won't need to issue them a 1099. If they are an S Corp, you don't owe them a 1099. If you paid them by credit card, you don't owe them a 1099. There are some exceptions to the 1099 rules. And so you just go through those exceptions and you can knock a couple of those people off your 1099s list and shorten the number of 1099s that you are required to send out. Okay, so step number 4 is eliminate anyone on your list of people that you paid who you don't actually have to send a 1099 to. You only need to send the ones you're required to send. Okay, step number 5, gather any W-9s that you missed. It is possible that you did not collect a W-9 from someone at the time that they did work for you. We all learned this rule the hard way, usually. So go back and get a W-9 from anybody that you paid throughout the year. There are services that can do this for you. It's also possible to just send them a blank W-9 in an email and say, hey, I need that. I'm sending you a 1099 in a week. I'm going to need this W-9 for you. Can you please send this out? Okay. All right. If you get any resistance on that, resistance tends to come because that person didn't want to report their income. I will just give you a warning that the law is still the law and you are still required to follow the law. You have to issue a 1099 that you owe to somebody, whether they're cooperative or not. So this is why that getting the W-9 up front is so helpful, because sometimes people are uncooperative and don't want to give you that paperwork. If you need to, blame your accountant. If you need to blame me, you can blame me. Say, I'm so sorry. I know this is annoying and establish you want, but my accountant says I'm not allowed to file my tax return without doing this, and it's required by law. I have to do it. Okay? Blame your accountant. All right. You can't control other people. not following the law, but you can control yourself, and that's the one you are responsible for. Okay, next, step number 6 is optional but highly recommended. TIN matching. TIN stands for a taxpayer ID number. It is very important that the tax ID number on the 1099 you issue to someone is accurate, right? I have seen it. It happens all the time. 1099s get mistakes on them, and somebody will issue a 1099 to the wrong Social Security number. Well, that person is going to get a letter from the IRS, and the person who should have gotten the 1099 is going to also be messed up in the system. It's going to require a correction. It's going to require paperwork and correspondence with the IRS if you get that number wrong. So saving yourself some headache up front, doing a little extra legwork on the front end will save you a lot of work in cleanup if you get that taxpayer ID number wrong. There is a free tool at the IRS website for TIN matching. So you can do a little Google search for that. Or if you take my 1099s course, I have a link directly to it in my notes. But TIN matching is something you can do for free at the IRS website, and it is worth your time. So do that. And then the last step is to actually issue the 1099. Now, there is an old-fashioned way you can print the blank one and do it by hand off the IRS website, but it's very easy to make mistakes that way. I don't recommend it. These days, there are lots of electronic services, and the good news is they're pretty cheap. There may be a couple bucks per 1099 that you have to send, and they can do a lot of backstop and checking before they get sent. And some of them even come with a guarantee that they'll fix it if it gets messed up. Okay, so it's really worth using a service. I like the service called Track 1099 that got bought by Avalara. The prices went up a little bit, but they're still pretty cheap, like about $3 per 1099, which to me is really worth not having mistakes that cause you months of correspondence with the IRS. So I hope that checklist feels really useful to you. I hope that you can take that and go make your list of everybody that you owe a 1099 to. And if you're realizing you want a little bit more hand-holding with that, that's fine. I got you. I have a course that's really short and sweet on how to issue a 1099, which has a written outline that you can refer to. It has all the details about who you don't have to issue a 1099 to. There are some exceptions in the 1099 rules. And I also give you links to my favorite tools. I have my favorite service for sending out 1099s. I give you a link to that, the TIN matching, etc. So if you want that full tips and tricks, full list of exceptions, full checklist in written format with a video walkthrough, you can get that at sunlighttax.com/1099. The price of the course is $97, and that is if you have 2 penalties for just being 1 day late past the January 31st deadline, this course will already pay for itself. So it's priced to be less than the penalties of not issuing a 1099 by the deadline. So it's well worth your time if you decide you want that extra support. Either way, I hope this episode has been helpful. Go forth and issue those 1099s that you owe. It is one of those checklist things you got to get done in January when you're self-employed, but you got this. It's not that hard, and you can do it. I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps. I'm so grateful. My tax guide, Taxes for Humans, is available wherever you buy books and at sunlighttax.com/book. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.